Well, while we're waiting, how are you doing today, my fabulous co host?
I'm doing good. The sun has come out after a day of rain, so that always feels good.
Excellent. And you, Amy? Hope your day's going well.
Yeah, very, very well so far. Absolutely. It's a sunny day here in the Pacific Northwest, which is always nice.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I love it when we have beautiful weather. Okay, so we're go ahead and grab your coffee, your tea, your chablis, whatever your drink of choice is. We're gonna give everyone another minute and then we're gonna get going. Speaking today with the fantastic Turvin extraordinary woman, Amy Isuza. Please repost the space once again, just so we can show our support to women who join us to tell their story. So while we're doing that, Hazel Moon, I'm gonna turn it over to you for just a moment. If you want to just get us actually ignore me. We're gonna luckily we can edit this part out. I'm looking at you, Nat. We'll edit this part out. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get going because we want to be able to cover as much information with you as possible, Amy. People will, the space will be recorded. It will be up next week across all audio platforms. So we are very grateful that the fabulous Amy Sousa could join us today because we thought it would be a great opportunity to hear more about Amy. As always with Storyteller, we like to show the other side of women that is not just the front facing when it comes to this fight, which is what we mainly focus on, right? Is language and protecting our sex class. But today we're gonna get to know Amy a little bit better. So, Amy, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about young Amy.
Uh, well, I am the oldest of three girls. So my house was very much about women and girls. My dad used to joke that he was a minority in a sorority. Um, Girls were, pretty much everything girl, girl, girl all the time. And my sisters and I are all very different. There's a 6 year spread between me and my youngest sister. So we were all pretty close in age, with all kinds of different interests and activities. I was a very precocious child from a young age. I liked to test the rules to see where the boundaries were, and my parents had, they had very good boundaries. I mean, they were pretty strict. We grew up religious. We can get into the fundamentalist religion, but yeah, but they had really good boundaries. And if they said, you're going to have a timeout for 2 minutes if you did that, or if they said you're going to lose dessert, or you're not going to be able to go to that slumber party, or whatever they said the consequence was, that was the consequence. So I have very good models of boundaries in my family. There's a little funny story because they never said things like, you're going to be dead meat, or I'm going to kill you if you do this. There was in general, there was nothing hyperbolic. It was like, you're going to get three swats on the bum, or like whatever it was. It was just, matter of fact. But they did have this one little thing that they said, which was, your name will be mud. And that, to me, was the most terrifying thing that they said, because I did also take that literally, since everything else was very matter of fact and literal. And I remember in kindergarten having this thought. I just had a beloved teacher, Miss Alice, and I I remember like whenever they did say that one, like, if you lick the frosting off that cupcake, your name will be Mud. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And then I will have to go into kindergarten and Miss Alice will greet me and she'll say, like, good morning, Amy. And then my mom will say, like, oh no, it's Mud now. And I'll have to hang my head and everyone will know I did the bad thing because my name is Mud. So anyway, but that's just to say, ultimately I grew up with good boundaries and, yeah, boundaries have remained important.
Were you always outspoken even as a kid? Like, because you know the cost of being in this fight. You're fully aware of it physically, mentally, everything. But even as a kid, were you of the mindset that if you saw something that you didn't think was right, that you were going to call it out? Were you like that?
Yes, I very much liked to I cared about fairness. Also when you have uh, two sisters, I'm sure anyone who has siblings understands just how perfectly you can split a cookie or a cupcake or something that you're meant to share, like just how evenly you get at cutting things because fairness really matters when you have multiple siblings. And fairness did matter to me in general. There's there's another famous story in my family where I was in junior high and I don't really remember this. My dad remembers it much better, but apparently I just like waltzed into the house after getting home from school and I just screamed at the top of my lungs, I know my rights. Um, and my dad, had no idea what was going on. My mom wasn't there and he just like sent me to my room and was like, you don't talk that way, in this house and go to your room. But then when they like figured it out, I I had been speaking to some friends at school and I realized my bedtime was earlier than everyone else's and I had discovered, I was told by my compatriots like I have rights and I can stay up till 10 or however late I wanted to stay up. I shouldn't have to go to bed at the same time as my little sisters. So
So
yes.
organizing protests at a very young age is
Yes,
what you're saying.
exactly. And I always have been, honing arguments, that has always been something that I really cared about. My littlest sister, her tactic with my parents was what she called playing dead, where she would just agree with whatever they said and then, go forward doing her own thing. And she always was counseling me like, just play dead. But my whole attitude has always been, if I can argue my point, I know that if I just say it clearly enough, I believe in my point so much that I know that if I just say it clearly enough, I will convince you. And so I just have, growing up, if I thought that my views were different than my parents, I would just keep arguing, thinking that I would find the perfect way eventually to convince them of, whatever it was, the thing that I, wanted to do.
Are you a Pacific Northwest girl? Are you from here, or are you from everywhere?
I grew up in California in the Bay Area in San Jose and spent my childhood there. I went to a little Baptist church and a little Baptist school until I was in fifth grade. And so it wasn't until junior high that I was introduced to public school with all of the crazy things that come with that, like a big California public school system. And then I moved to New York at 18 for my undergraduate. I was very much into theater and dance, and I had the amazing opportunity to go to NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. So that was an amazing experience. And then I lived in New York for 15 years and worked there, and then moved to the Pacific Northwest. And now I've been here for about 15 years.
It's a completely different mindset, uh, coast to coast, right? From New York to the Pacific Northwest. Even though we're both coastal, it's a completely different vibe, when you say. Can you hear me?
Oops, sorry, I muted myself accidentally.
Oh no, that's okay. It's like, please don't let my internet be going out. That's all I was.
No. Yeah, there was such a, what I loved about New York is that, and they are very different, but what I loved about there was, and I know that it's changed a lot in the last 15 years, but there was such a feeling of you can explore whatever you want here. Whatever bizarre, weird thing that I might explore in New York, parts of myself that I wanted to test and try out. I knew that it would ultimately just kind of be mundane and middle of the road in New York City. There's so much, culturally, there are people from every country you could practically think of there. There are people doing all kinds of different art and all kinds of different academics and thought philosophies and religions. I loved that anything that you want to learn about in New York, you can find probably like the premier expert there. And I studied, I loved my education. I am I love academics, and I also love just exploring a lot of other topics. I explored such diverse things when I was there. Like, for example, this is a little known fact about me, but I studied palmistry. I got really fascinated by it, and I met this woman who came from like this lineage of like palmists from all the way back, and I just found it like the lines on the hands super fascinating. And I love archetypes, so there's all these like archetypal things within all of the like different esoteric arts. And so anyway, I studied a bunch of the esoteric arts for a while. I got really interested in all of those different archetypal ways of looking at the world, and symbology, and like understanding how symbology functions. And yeah, so there was just such an amazing opportunity in New York to uh, explore all kinds of different paths of thinking. And not, in New York, the other thing is you don't have to feel too attached to them, because your community is so diverse. And you don't have to like fit into one community group. That was something really different about moving to Port Townsend, Washington, where I have mostly been for the last 15 years, which is, it's a small town. It's a rural town. And I remember meeting people, and sometimes you would meet someone in Port Townsend, with a friend. Like I had a friend who was from there, which is how I got introduced to that town in the first place. And she might introduce me to someone and be like, like, oh, that's Brenda. When she was in high school, like she did this thing behind the bleachers with this one guy, and it was like this, like whatever crazy, thing that she did. And I was like, that's so bizarre. Like it was so bizarre to me that people's high school stories were still attached to them in such a way. And that people's stories really followed them around, and people talked about these old stories of theirs, where, having lived in New York for so long, your stories are not really attached to you because you have such diverse friend networks. So if you do something, like that, you maybe like wasn't your proudest moment, it's not really very attached to you. It's more like that crazy thing that you did that one time, rather than like, oh, that's who you are. Like, that's who this, I would hear stories about locals here, and it was like, yeah, that's who she is. And I was like, I think it's just like a crazy thing she did one time when she was like a child, basically, a teenager.
It is a different mentality between a large town. I mean, you don't even have to get to city level when you're talking about villages or anything like, right, where it's like, if that's the most exciting, like, and it's and I feel kind of bad for those situations, because you're right. It's like you do this one thing and it just follows you, because the town, it's like a circular firing squad, right? It's all the same people that, and it was your parents grew up with other people's parents and so on and so on. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the theater.
Yep.
And what piqued your interest as far as getting into theater?
I think it was an opportunity to explore. I mean, I really I had a great imagination as a child, and I really am so grateful that I did not grow up with the internet at all. Because outdoors and playing pretend games, playing pretend was just my absolute favorite thing to do as a child. And I had two younger sisters, so I was mainly, the director of these games, and I had very willing participants in my sisters. And my sort of besties in the neighborhood also loved to play pretend, dress up and pretend, and come up with all kinds of creative stories. In my history is theater, and my history is also writing, and I very much loved to be in my imagination and to just to be very creative and to play. And so I the older I got, the more seriously I took it. What was just my own imagination and fantasy. The older I got, there were more opportunities to take those gifts and skills and put them into things. And I found that when I was young, I was a bit of a character. And I liked to perform. I liked to, and I don't know if that is also partially being, the oldest child. And I was also happened to be the oldest grandchild. So you are, pushed forward to be an example for others when you're in that position. So I think it was, partially the gifts that were, that I happened to, that happened to be particular to me. And I think part of it was likely the the my order in the my nuclear family and extended family, and what was encouraged in me by the adults around me. I did dance and singing and all of that, so I just found it a really great opportunity to explore. And then when I was in high school, I did, when I knew that I wanted to take it even more seriously past high school, and perhaps do it professionally. I worked with a lot of community theaters. So I did children's theater. I did theater, at my high school. I did theater at this all boys high school. And I did a lot of community theater. So it also gave me a real great opportunity to mix with other adults in a way where we were colleagues. If you're in a play where you are working with adults, and you're all being directed by the same director, and you are more sort of colleagues than adults being your sort of, I don't know, direct, what would you call, like, teachers or super, I don't know what exactly what word I'm searching for, but it was a really cool time for me to see things about myself that I didn't necessarily see from my teachers or from my parents. And I would say I was very lucky, because the spaces that I was doing this in were very safe, and there was not the same kind of indoctrination happening that I do think, I unfortunately, is happening in the theater today, in terms of these ideologies being promoted. But it was a great opportunity for me to, yeah, sort of, um yeah, just learn a lot more about myself and learn a lot of poise and learn from adult mentors who were more in a mentorship, friendship relationship to me.
It seems like you are not one of those people who that you always want to know why. Like if someone tells you something and then you want to find out more about it, and it's like and if things have piqued your interest, you've gone like you were going down the rabbit hole before the rabbit hole existed. It's like you were like theater, so you immersed yourself in it. The everything that you've done, and one of the things that and I think is one of the coolest things about you is about the mythology, right?
Yeah.
And just like this, so what got you to just, because it just seems like you're the kind of person that when creatively, intellectually, whatever, it pops in your head, that it's almost like you have to figure out how the sausage is made in a way, or the history of it, and then is this something I want to do, and if I can do it, I'm going to just give my 100%. That just kind of seems the way you roll. So like what got you down that road with the mythology?
Um, well, I knew that I wanted to go to at some point. I had been doing arts education in New York City and working for the Brooklyn Arts Council. I had been that program has you partner with other artists, so I had a great opportunity to go into the New York City schools and always be partnered with different kinds of artists. I That was great, but I sort of knew that I wanted to do something else. I as well. Um, I knew that I was becoming in more interested in psychology, and also, I've always kind of been a natural counselor. I mean, literally in junior high, I was picked to be part of this natural helper program. So, the teachers in school identify you as like, a natural peer counselor, so I had done things like that before, and just in my job, just out in the world, even people have always just sought me out to share their stories. And I had this side job when I was doing some of the teaching work, right? I had this side job at Trader Joe's, and my colleagues just would laugh because sometimes people would just like come up to me and just start telling me their story, and they would like trap I would almost be trapped by their story, and they might be sharing things with me to the point of tears, and it happened multiple times, and my colleagues would just be like, and sometimes I would be like making eye contact like with a manager or something, like, get me out of here. um like I don't know how I got here with this person. But I also just started to be curious about myself in that way. Like, like people seem to seek me out for this sort of thing. I obviously there's something approachable about me, and there's something that must feel safe about me, that people feel that they want to share something intimate with me even when I'm a stranger. And it makes more sense to be like a counselor among your friends because they know you, like they actually know you're safe. But I started just noting about myself, like that age in your late 20s, where you're like, like I'm seeing some of how I am perceived in the world, and I hadn't given those gifts quite as much credence. And so I was looking for grad schools, and I knew that I was interested in something a little out of the ordinary. I knew I didn't just want to go into kind of the, like a kind of a regular cognitive behavioral program. I knew I wanted something a little different. And so I was looking at a bunch of different schools outside of, the usual. And there was this school, this the grad school that I did end up going to is called Pacifica Graduate Institute, and they were the home of the Joseph Campbell archive. So they have a whole library, just Joseph Campbell library, that has all of his, you know, all of his books, of course, but all of his like journals and personal notes and letters and, all of that kind of minutia of his. And yeah, I knew that I wanted something more in that archetypal realm. I had been interested for a while in the esoteric arts, but what I liked about them was not like, I didn't take them so literally, but I liked all of this archetypalness. I liked the notion of there are these archetypes at work in our life. And for people who don't know what an archetype is sort of the opposite end of a stereotype, where a stereotype, like we would say, like a sex, obviously we all talk about sex stereotypes all the time. So a stereotype is really a reduction, taking that which is woman and reducing it and flattening it and making it two-dimensional, and really turning it into a caricature. So the archetype is the opposite of that. It's something that is more holistic. It's like a holistic pattern that exists across time and culture. So the stereotype of a mom might be like, the good mommy, who gives you everything you want, or some stereotype about moms. But the archetype, of like the mother, would include everything that is mothering. It includes the light, it includes the shadow. It's a universal force. Even if you don't have, even if you don't know who your biological mother is, we all experience mothering, and we all do mothering to some extent. So there's all these, archetypes, like, the lover, the warrior, the nurturer, the philosopher, the magician, all of these archetypes that we might embody. And I just was fascinating by these as a universal force. And of course, that's all very related to mythology. Mythology, the gods and the goddesses are they themselves are archetypes, and they also are existing in in all kinds of stories, in all kinds of fairy tales and stories. There's this really great line that Clarissa Pinkola Estes says in Women Who Run with the Wolves, in her book. She starts it out by saying that between psychology and story, story is the elder of the two. So story is the first way by which we know ourselves. It's the first, that oral tradition of story is the first way that we come to understand ourselves. And these different archetypes live in all of us. Clarissa Pinkola Estes is specifically an archetypal psychologist. So anyway, I found a school that very much resonated with me in terms of that. And I liked the sense of being able to reflect on the world, not in a literal way, not taking the world so literally, but looking at the archetypes that present themselves at different times, at our different, like, let's say at our different developmental ages, but also at our different developmental ages as a culture. Different cultures carry, or privilege different archetypes, different circumstances, different archetypes are drawn forth. So I think myth and story and archetype were all very blended for me, and were, I think, again, coming from my loving to be in the realm of the imagination, it resonated for me.
Let's jump forward a little bit and talk about the known heretic.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think that's where most of our listeners would know you from. How did the known heretic come to be?
So, known heretic was a moniker that I gave myself. And the very first, I loved the word heretic because, of course, it has all these great synonyms like, renegade and iconoclast and schismatic thinker, and all of these wonderful, yummy ways to say, you think a little bit differently. but I also really liked it because, there was a lot of fundamentalism in the religion I was raised in. And it really struck me immediately, almost immediately, how fundamentalist trans ideology is. So, my very first tag for my name, known heretic, was resisting religious and gendered fundamentalism. And I could just see the fundamentalism in it. Because I had been raised so religiously, because I had been raised in a family that was like, men are the head of the households and women are meant to be submissive. And I fought a lot with specifically my dad over that, because on the one hand, he was like, women should be submissive. And on the other hand, I was told growing up constantly, you're just like your father. My dad is very loud. He's very outspoken. He's very ambitious. And I was like, if I'm just like you, why are you telling me to be submissive? And it was, I could not like square, I could not, square the circle or whatever that phrase is. I could not come to grips with like, how can you constantly be telling me that I'm just like you and also have this expectation that I'm going to somehow be submissive. And I pushed back. It's funny because like these TRAs will be like, how are you pushing against gender, and you wear earrings or makeup or something. And I'm like, you don't know how much I have pushed back against gender growing up. I pushed back against gender in being as outspoken and argumentative and putting myself in leadership positions, because the church that I was raised in had, stricter roles for men and women. So I grew up resisting gender projected on my body, and gender telling me what I could and could not do and who I could and could not be. And also, feeling very identified with my dad. I mean, I feel a lot more identified with my mom as well now. I feel like I'm a lot more balanced. But, in my teens and 20s, I was very identified with my dad in terms of wanting to be like him. I just so admired who he was in the world. I admired his integrity. I admired him, starting his own business. I admired, the way that, yeah, that he was just gregarious and yeah, himself outspoken. And I just wanted to be like those things. And my mom is, I mean, she's incredible, and she has such gifts of intuition and hospitality, but she's quiet and shy, and it didn't, you know, obviously I loved her so much when I was those same ages, but there I wasn't, her gifts were not as clear to me as they are now. And um yeah, I just, yeah, was pushing against those stereotypes. Anyway, so known heretic was a blending of, being heretical against the particular religion I was raised in, and also being a heretic to this secular religion. And I just saw the fundamentalism, to me, was exactly the same. It was the exact same fundamentalism of like the complete bifurcation of men and women, of the particular brand of church that I was raised in, and this complete bifurcation within trans ideology. I was like, it's the, that meme of The Office, like, it's the same picture, like this is the same picture.
Don't know if your mic is working
Oh,
there.
I'm here.
No, Hazel Moons.
Oh,
She was gonna there we go. Yeah, I don't think your mic is working. Well, can you hear us?
I can hear. Oh, you're talking to her.
No, you're fine, Amy. Yeah, I don't think your mic is working, Hazel Moon. So while we're waiting on that, so let's talk then about your fight, in this fight, the fight within the fight. When did you start first noticing that this was becoming an issue that we were going to lose control of, the whole gender ideology?
I don't think I realized we were losing control until maybe 2015 to like 2017. I had noted like since I was in New York and like part of an artsy crowd, like I had friends who were using like neo pronouns way back in like 2007-ish. There was a woman who I thought she was a bit kooky. I just thought she was a bit kooky. She used like zem, and I just like, I thought she was like a kooky artist, and I did not think really anything of her neo pronouns. And in fact, I just remember being like, placating her, but being just like slightly annoyed. Like, ugh, this is like very annoying to like try to remember. But it wasn't until two events. One, in the theater world where I was in the Pacific Northwest, there was a very non-conforming boy, and I had always I had encouraged the students that I with to just like play, and explore, and just like, all of these adornments that we have are just, cultural adornments, earrings are cultural adornments, clothes are, face paint is just cultural. All kinds of cultures had face paint, so I didn't think much of it, but the parents, he wanted to start going on hormones, and the parents in town wanted to help him, and they got this GoFundMe together. And that was just like an alarm bell, because I was already doing some of the embodiment work that I do and exploring that in my psychology. I was being an education director, and I was going back to school while I was the education director. And I was deeply concerned. I was like, why are we telling this kid to hate his body? That makes no sense to me. And I was sort of talking to colleagues of mine in the theater and being like, I don't see why we're telling this young man to hate his body. This is clearly body hate to me, and that's a problem. And I just kept getting told, well, you don't know what you don't know. We don't know what we don't know. We can't feel what he feels. And that was very unsatisfying to me. I was already saying things like, well, like, I guess we don't know what he feels, but we do know what he feels. I mean, we don't know what he thinks about himself or his like opinion about how he feels, but we know he doesn't feel female organs, and we know he does feel male organs. So I don't know what this feeling is that you're talking about. And so that was happening, that was concerning me. And I was talking to people publicly and I was getting pushback, but there was no transphobe yet. Then Me Too happened, and I was swept away in that because I had had a trauma. I had been raped in my late 20s. And I had kept it a secret, and especially from my family, I had kept it a secret because well, for many reasons, but I kept it a secret. And during Me Too, I went public with my story, and I was able to talk about it. And it was a date rape that I felt, I had previously felt ashamed because I thought, I should have known better. About some of the circumstances of that event. And so I had, had a lot of shame and self-blame. And Me Too really helped me be like, oh my God, like, that wasn't my fault. That was not my fault. And, that should never have happened. And I told my story, and it was just very empowering because I had had some, I had had some depression and troubling behavior. And of course, my parents had been very confused about why I was not myself. So anyway, that was very empowering and moving for me. And so this is all to say, I went to the Seattle Facebook page and I was interacting with people before the Women's March, on the Seattle Women's March page, and then there was these group of men saying, pussy hats are transphobic. This is a group of men who, of course, call themselves trans women. Pussy hats are transphobic. And I was like, surely not. Like, what are you talking about? No, this makes no sense. And I said to them, are you literally, like, what are you talking about? Like, are you saying vaginas are transphobic? And they were like, yes. And I was like, surely not. Like, surely you've got to be kidding me. And I just kept arguing with them. As I didn't really think anything of it, but I kept arguing and I kept being like, where else are women supposed to talk about their bodies? Like, where else should women's bodies be centered except, the Women's March? That this is the exact right place to center our bodies and it doesn't hurt anyone else. And like, I don't know what and I just kept going back and forth with these guys. And then they doxed me and they were in my private messages and attacking me. And like, they had all this past information about me and past addresses and phone numbers and my, parents, dad's business phone number. And they just had all this information and it scared me. It really scared me. But it also just absolutely fueled me because I was like, I did not expect that. I did not. I had already faced some pushback from voicing my opinions, but it was not anything like that. That was the first time that I was like, what's happening? What is this? What is this new thing that's happening? And almost immediately after I was doxxed, and I mean, it led me down a rabbit hole of just like researching as much as possible. I had not been like, that issue had not been the main issue that I cared about. And it rapidly took my focus after that. And I think also right after that was the big degenerates event at the San Francisco Public Library. And for those of you who don't know, San Francisco Public Library hosted this group called the Degenerates, which is this group of men. I think they're based in Portland, and this is the group with the iconic I Punch Turfs wife beater. That wife beater was hanging in the library in public where kids could see, and all of these wrapped barbed wire wrapped baseball bats and blue and pink painted hatchets. And it just was so clearly violence against women that I was just shocked. And I was arguing on that page, like, how can you allow this? I was, there was a bunch of women arguing on the Facebook page for the San Francisco Public Library. So there were a couple events that happened right in a row that just were so very shocking that like very quickly politicized me about this issue. And it was kind of just a perfect storm because it hit me right in the spot where I was finally empowered about my wound. I was empowered about my own boundary violation. I was empowered to finally say, just because I went on a date with this guy, just because I went home with him when I, had been feeling like I shouldn't have, that was just because I had gone home with him was not, did not give him special access, to rape me. My boundaries mattered. And it was like this moment where I had reclaimed my boundaries in such a strong way, and I was not ashamed to say what had happened to me and what was done to me, really. And so I think it was just really this perfect storm because these men were not going to shut me up. I was not about to be shut up by them after all of the work that I had done to be able to speak freely and to reclaim my boundaries. And pretty much since then, my whole focus has been boundaries, boundaries, boundaries.
Thanks, Amy. I apologize for that. The space is a little out of control today. I lost complete sound, couldn't hear at all. So thanks for that. I want to check. Hazel, can you hear?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yay, yes.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, there's been rather glitchy tonight. I'm still staggered with the vagina's a transphobic comment, Amy. I mean, that is an absolute classic, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't, just like, surely not. Surely you have got to be kidding me. This can't be what you're, I just, yeah, I just kept thinking they can't keep holding this opinion. I'm gonna explain it to them. They're mistaken, and I'm gonna explain it. I mean, that was how I first took to Twitter. Like, I'm gonna help explain this to people because they're confused, and I could see how regressive the stereotypes were, and I was like, they're people are confused, and yeah, I really initially thought, like, if I could just explain it, that people would understand. And I quickly moved on from wanting to explain it to people who were on the other side to empowering people on our own side, empowering women who needed a voice to speak up.
I think that's very true. I think a lot of us came in thinking they can't really mean it like that, that
Yeah.
there has to be some kind of discussion about this and a realization of how important that this is and the repercussions of all this ideology is. And then you come to the realization that they're in this complete closed circuit, that no new information can come in, and that anybody outside of it is forbidden, is a bigot, can't even be listened to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, it kind of continues to shock me. I mean, I find this all still shocking. I find it shocking how entrenched people are and how they can't see. I just did this little talk back video to this young woman who's sort of like an Instagram influencer, and she had this giant realization because there's a news story going around. Oh God, I forget what the news I forget what the it of the news story is, but basically the gist is, there's a gay man. He was filming women naked, without their knowledge and consent, and selling it. And she made this video where she's like, a man is a man is a man, and I don't care if he's gay, like, he shouldn't have been doing that, and he doesn't get a free pass just because he's gay. He shouldn't have been filming women. And but of course there were then she got comments from some of her followers that were like, yeah, and it's just the same even if the guy says he's trans. And she was like, no, 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 you're transphobic, you're bigots, no, no, that's different, that is different. So I just found it really funny because she had like this whole, like, she's like 20 something, and she had this whole realization, like, a man is a man is a man, she said in her video. But not if he puts on lipstick, not then, apparently. So I think there's just still this massive disconnect that's happening for so many people, and just continues to shock me.
Can we talk about Tacoma?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
Okay.
can.
The Tacoma at the women's event. For those in our listeners who might not know about this event, this is one of the first times I saw Amy, and you chose fight instead of flight. And can you just give us a little background about what happened at that event?
Yeah. So this was during Kelly J. Keene's Let Women Speak tour in the United States. And I had already faced a mob. I had already done the Let Julie Swim event with Julie Jaman, who's an 80-year-old woman who is in Port Townsend, and she was famously banned from the YMCA for life for calling out a man in her space. I organized a press conference for her in my town. There was about 30 of us women or so. It was meant to be just a press conference. And we had like 300 Antifa that came in from Seattle and Portland and all over the place. And we were just massively attacked. So I had already experienced some just, yeah, major pushback about from Antifa and trans rights activists. So the Tacoma event happened. I At that event there we were sort of surrounded by a bunch of Antifa. You could tell they were Antifa. They had some of them had their black bloc on. Some of them had fortified gloves and just a bunch of different things. So I think we were all on the alert when we first arrived at that event. And yeah, while Lear Keith from Wolf was speaking, there was a man, and a masked young man who was just, I could see out of the corner of my eye, he was running up to her, and it was one of those things that I talk about with instincts, where it was not a it was not a thinking moment for me. It was simply an instinctual response moment where I saw that he was going to push her down from behind. And I ran up and blocked him from being able to do that. And I just, I just remember running up into him and screaming, no, no, no. Almost after I had made contact with him, there was another man close by on our side who also joined me in pushing him away. And it's one of the moments that I speak about in terms of staying grounded in your instincts. I think I was really grounded in my instincts. I did not think about the situation. I didn't like decide in my head, here is how I am going to handle this now. It was a moment of responsiveness to the situation. And I think there were a lot of calculations going on below my conscious awareness. I think there was, a calculation about my size and his size. I think there was a calculation about the group as I had assessed it, how many people on my side, how many people on his side, who I felt like he was in the group. I think there was, I think if he had been 6 feet tall and 280 pounds, I don't think I would have made that exact same call. But he was very slight and not very tall, and I was able to be in my instincts and respond to that moment, and block him from from one taking Lear down, and from disrupting the talk. But yeah, it ended up being this very iconic moment that, me in my red coat, flying into him. And it was, replayed on Fox News a bunch of times, which was, kind of fun, because it was just like, I was just like the woman in the red coat.
It's the inspiration for internet our Women's Day that we wear red every year, right? Is that red
Yeah.
coat?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, that's the thing with this especially for women in this movement. It's like it's almost this resignation that there's going to be some kind of physical pushback, and it's always one-sided for the most part, and where there's because it was part of the intimidation game, and uh like, and we are seeing differences now when women are going out and speaking and protesting around the world. They're getting a little bit better about giving women room to breathe and speak. But here in the US though, like, we see how they're able to organize protests over in Turf Island. We've seen some successful stuff in Australia. do you think, do you have hope that we could have at some point some kind of national, women's march, or where we will get to that point where we could organize in that sense in safety and be able to just march for our basic dignity?
I mean, I do hope we'll get there. I really do. I think people are getting more and more fed up. I do think there's more and more pushback about men in women's sports, men in women's bathrooms. I see these laws that are being created at the state level. I think it's a really good thing. Uh, my concern is really about I guess what I would call kind of controlled opposition, in that I think people are willing to critique what they would call trans women being in women's sports. They're willing to critique trans women being in women's spaces, but they're not willing to simply say there is no such thing as trans. So I worry about the notion of trans. While people may be willing to say, yeah, these quote unquote trans women shouldn't be in our sports and spaces, the notion of trans itself is entrenched. And this is one of the major reasons why I have gone after gender dysphoria so hard. And one of my talks that I did for WDI International's their weekly women's panel, I did a talk critiquing the creation of the trans child and a critique of gender dysphoria as it exists, because I worry that there are so many parents out there, and even the parent groups, who I think are doing good things, but a lot of these parent groups call themselves ROGD parents, and they believe in the notion of ROGD kids, rapid onset gender dysphoria. And we have Abigail Schreier's book, which is a good book, but it also reifies the notion of a ROGD child, and that this rapid onset gender dysphoria is happening to them, and gender dysphoria is something kids can have, and some kids do have it, and that you can get it, instead of just saying this is a cult, this is cult indoctrination, this is cult tactics at work, this is propaganda on the level of Edward Bernays, and there is no such thing as trans, and no one has gender dysphoria, and that is not a thing that exists. And it's just as ludicrous as the satanic panic or multiple personality disorder. No, kids have this because there is no such thing as an identity incongruence. There is no such thing as having the wrong identity for your body. People create all kinds of identities. Identity is completely a self-created story, and the story that you create about yourself can cause you distress. People create all kinds of stories about themselves that cause themselves distress. People are often the authors of their own distress via their identity. People will tell themselves, I am a loser. That causes them a lot of distress. They literally identify as a loser, and then it makes them depressed, and it gives them anxiety. And there's all kinds of identities that can give you distress. It doesn't mean they're not self-created, and this one is not even self-created. It's just it's manufactured outside of you, and it's a cult manufacture. So anyway, I that's all a long-winded way of saying I have still a lot of skepticism about this fight, and even though we are making wins on in individual battles, I worry about the war in its totality, and I worry about what's coming. I worry about transhumanism. There is a new thing going around where people are falling in love with their AI. One of the more famous detransitioners has been caught up in this, where she fell in love with her AI, and she is heartbroken because the open source AI terminated that version, whatever that version was, 2.15 or whatever, they terminated that version, so she feels like they killed her boyfriend. But I see this, I see this as a unfortunate, danger, that we're going to have a lot of these trans kids and formerly trans kids, they're so dissociated, where we are still preaching, not we, not us in this, live, but the larger world, the public education system is preaching this dissociated ideology at them. And chronic onlineness creates it, and you don't have to risk anything. There is no risk, there is no vulnerability, there's no intimacy, there's no risk in falling in love with your AI. And for kids who have had their genitals chopped off, it who don't seek, sexual gratification, falling in love with your AI is even more attractive, because you're not seeking, anyway. I'm very concerned. I still have a lot of concerns.
So we're pushing farther and farther away from our humanity, basically, right? Like, because now we're at this point where we went from born in the wrong body so you can identify into something different, doesn't fix it. Now we're going to add metal and turn everyone into the $6 million man and the bionic woman. And now and I've seen stories of that where people are falling in love with the AIs and stuff. And then I remember that about a decade ago there was a show on the Learning Channel about people falling in love with like trash cans and chandeliers and stuff. And back then it was like like that sideshow kind of event, right? You're like, oh, look at this person that's eating mattress foam or marrying a chandelier or whatever. But now it's like everything is they've pretty much shattered the word taboo. That doesn't even exist in society anymore because you're shamed immediately the other way if you say something isn't appropriate for walking society, like walking down the street society or things like that. And now it's like people are harming themselves mentally over an AI, right? And saying, oh, you killed my boyfriend or whatever. So it's like we're pushing farther and farther away from the thing that makes us humans, right? Which is that humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. I this is one of the reasons that I, continue to talk about embodiment and instincts. I don't even like this phrase. I really don't even like no child is born in the wrong body. I don't like that word in. We're not in bodies. Bodies are not suits that we take on and off. We don't have bodies. Bodies are not our possessions. We are embodied. We are embodied. We are born embodied. We are fully embodied. We are our bodies. There is no part of our body that is not us. And there's just, we're in a completely uh, plastic surgery, compartmentalized, dissociated culture where people, think that they can hate a part of themselves, and that is not self-hate. Hating a part of yourself. If I hate my hand, that is self-hate. Hating my hand is self-hatred. That my hand is me. It's not, it's not just a part of me, it is me.
Talking of bodies and embodiment, you've been through a really difficult time the last few years, haven't you? And you obviously decided that when you got the diagnosis to be very open about the fact that you had cancer on Twitter. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was hard. I mean, I don't think I knew how hard it was until it was over, actually. I think this year I've actually realized how hard it was, because while I was in it, I was so determined to, very much maintain good spirits. And so I don't think I completely touched, how scared I was at certain times. But yeah, that was a scary diagnosis. My tumor came on really fast. I sort of noted that I maybe felt something, and I thought, well, I'm of the age where I could be, having some perimenopausal, cysts in my breast. I know that is a thing that has happened to women. And I just thought, I hoped that maybe it was that. And, yeah, and then I got my diagnosis, and my tumor was just rapidly growing. And when I finally got my diagnosis, because it's like you feel something, and then it takes all this time to get referrals and whatnot, and finally see someone. But they phased me out at stage 3 breast cancer. My tumor was, they give you a Schrodinger score where, they tell you out of 1 to 10 how fast your tumor is growing. And mine was growing at the rate of 10. And it was at that point 10 centimeters. So like, if you think of 10 centimeters, that's how far you have to that's how wide women dilate to have a baby. So it was a giant tumor. And it was, again, at the time, I was, again, so determined that I was going to be like brave and bravely face it, that I don't know. I didn't, like, I did drop into the fear a couple of times, and luckily I had a lot of support. I had a ton of support, which made such an amazing difference. And I actually see Laura Wiley Haynes in the space, and she was one of the first women that I spoke to about it. And she was such an amazing support for me, and sharing with me her story. And that women like her, Laura was amazing, and other women like her were so amazing to have in my corner. But one thing that I focused on, because I wanted to have a focus. I didn't want to be lost in being sick and feeling sick. I wanted to have a focus. And so one of the things that I did focus on was, this absolute discrepancy, because I really was driven to maintain a sensation. I was very much driven to save my breast. And I know a lot of women make a lot of different choices. And I read all kinds of books. And, a lot of women just choose, mastectomy, or even just the double mastectomy. But I had a really interesting situation, because I had just started dating this wonderful man. And as I said, I had a trauma years earlier, and I had not really been ready in almost 20 years. I had not been ready to seriously take on partnership. Now I had dated, but I had never really been wanting to have a true partner. And met I had a friend, a man friend, who was a friend in the periphery. We had been friends for a few years, and that friendship shifted. And I was finally ready to, have a adult, meaningful, intimate relationship. And that diagnosis came 4 months into the relationship. So I was just like, no, like, no, this is not fair. Like, finally, I'm like in my body and feeling my body, and with someone who I want to be intimate with. And I am not ready to lose my breast. I am not ready to, lose these beautiful sensations that I am getting to experience right now. And I immediately knew, no, I am going to fight to keep my breast. And so I determined that I would fight and do everything I could. And I did the regular oncology path, but I also did a lot of naturopathic things. I had a lot of supplements. I did a lot of fasting. I just did a ton of fasting, which I completely changed my diet. I removed anything inflammatory from my diet, and completely honed my diet in a way that would starve the cancer of any sugars. So this was like a cancer starving protocol that I was doing, because I knew that I just wanted to do everything I could to save my breast. And it just struck me, of course, how I was honing everything in my life. I was on, like, I had no sugar, no alcohol, no carbs at all, no eggs, no milk, no grains, nothing that I just anything that might cause anyone any kind of inflammation was completely removed from my diet. And then I was also doing all kinds of fasting, intermittent fasting, and then like 3-day fasts around my chemo, and going through the chemo, and again just in the fight of my life to save my breast. And I just was like online, of course, in this fight that I also do, a fight for women's rights, watching these girls just cut off their breasts and literally throw them in the trash. And there was, right at the time when I was in cancer, there was on RuPaul's Drag Race this woman who called herself Gottmik, who had a whole photo spread that was like, with all of these, luxury items. And she was dressed up in this costume with, sequined zippers across her, freshly cut off breasts, and this plastic bag that's like this designer bag with these bloody fake breasts in it. And it's just like this photo spread for her. And she's cut off her breasts, and she's doing the drag race thing where she's like, I don't even get it. Like, she's a woman who's cut off her breasts, she's in drag as a woman. It's just all kinds of objectification, and this absolute objectification of double mastectomies. Um, and I just found it even more horrifying. I was even more horrified than ever about how cavalier and reckless these girls are with their breasts, and how little they care about them, and how little they love them. And I was just determined to love my body and to not lose sensation. And the surgeons, they tell you, my first surgeon, I went and found, I went and found another option, and I found an amazing surgeon team at what do you call it, in Washington. In Seattle are some of the absolute best cancer hospitals that are in the entire country. And I went to just an amazing top cancer hospital and surgeon in Seattle for my surgery. But this is to say, my first surgeon told me, she was really trying to push the mastectomy. She was convinced that I had to have it, and she really wanted to convince me. And she and her whole team kept telling me, you're going to get plastic surgery afterwards. Like, you might even love your breasts better. You're going to love your breasts better. She kept telling me they're going to look better. They're going to look better. That's what she kept telling me. They're going to look better. And I was just like, I don't look at my breasts. They are on my body. Other people look at me. I don't look at me except when I'm looking in a mirror to see that my clothes are fitted right. I'm not looking at me. Other people look at me. I don't look at me. And it struck me as just how objectifying the whole process is. Like, I'm supposed to be concerned about how other people are looking at me, and I kept telling her, I don't care about what other people see when they look at me. I want to feel me. I want to feel me from the inside. I want to feel these beautiful sensations with this man that I'm falling in love with. I am not ready to give up these feelings that I'm feeling. And I know if you give me the mastectomy, I am going to be completely numb. I know from other women who have experienced it. I will be completely numb, and I am not willing to have that.
I don't think they tell women enough. I think we went through a period where we really brought awareness to breast cancer more. It was always being talked about. You had the Susan Koenig Foundation set up, all of that. And it was like, and we were teaching women about breast health, and we were pushing for mammograms. And it almost seems because it's really hard to circle the square with this, where men claiming to be women and they have the fake breasts and stuff. It's like, and then the women who are cutting off their breasts, it's almost like we're not allowed to talk about women's breast health anymore. It's taboo in a way. And also the fact that, like, I don't think most women know that they have an option sometimes, not in every circumstances, but if they get that diagnosis, it doesn't automatically mean they have to lose their breast. I mean, when you were talking to me about this in advance, I didn't even know that was an option,
Yeah.
right?
And I asked the surgeon point blank, like, what is the difference in life expectancy? And she was like, none. There is no difference in life expectancy if you get the mammogram or not. She said there is a slight more chance that the cancer could return if we didn't scrape out every single last cell. But in the surgery themselves, they cut around your cancer tumor with a wide margin, and they check after the surgery. They do this whole check for cancer cells. I mean, they do a ton of checks, and then you have radiation. So, and you have more chemo. I did chemo and then surgery and then radiation and then more chemo. And she said that all of these things, PS, come with their own risk of cancer. Chemo comes with a risk of cancer. Chemo is a carcinogen. I mean, radiation comes with its own risk of cancer. There's all these other cancers that you put yourself at risk for when you do this. So but I had done all this, diet and removing all sugar and cancer shrinking diet and the fasting. So I had shrunk by the time of my surgery, I had shrunk my tumor from 10 centimeters to 3 centimeters. So they were very impressed. I mean, my oncologists were just incredibly impressed with that result, which of course they thought was only from the chemo. And they were very impressed. And the doctors are so specified that they do not think holistically. I mean, I have many thoughts now about just medicine in general, but they don't. They told me, I thought they were going to, I want to be a good student all the time. I love being a good student, and I just wanted like pats on my head. And when I told, my oncology doctor, like, hey, I'm doing this like really cool nutrition plan to like support what we're doing here with the chemo. And I'm going to do this and I'm doing that. And he just said, you can eat whatever you want. Diet didn't cause this. And I was like, well, certainly didn't help. Like, alcohol is a carcinogen. Like, it certainly didn't help, probably, that I was having, multiple glasses of wine or beers, a week. Like, maybe it didn't cause this, but it certainly did not help, and now what I'm doing is helping. Alcohol is it's like a number two carcinogen after cigarettes. There's a lot of things I was doing that were not, if maybe they didn't cause the cancer, but they certainly did not help. And then I changed to, having pretty much everything in my life helping it to go away. But even the oncologist was like, you don't have to, you don't have to do that diet. You don't have to do that. And I was like, well, whatever, I'm going to do it. And I think it made a massive difference. And anyway, yeah, it just, yeah, I knew that after cancer, I mean, it's funny. I think I was talking about that girl, Andra, who realized that gay men could also do bad things, even though they're gay. They can still behave like men sometimes. And she sent a bunch of her like flying monkeys after me, and they were like, they called me a boomer. I was like, I'm Gen X, bitches. But I was like, you don't even know your generations. But they're like, they're like 20 nothing. But it was just like, I made a little video. I haven't put it on X yet, but it just like struck me as hilarious, because I was like, you're calling me old? Like, I friggin' beat cancer. Like, you know how happy I am to have made it to my 50th birthday? Like, are you kidding me? Like, thank God I'm old. Like they were making fun of my hair. They were like making fun of my part in my hair, and I was like, you think I care that you're making fun of my hair? Like, I was bald last year. I was literally bald last year. Like, I'm so grateful for this hair. Like, you think you can make me feel bad about myself for my hair? Like, it's just like, so like, it's just pretty hilarious that these young people, and I made a whole post like, this is the great thing about being this age. Like, I am not 20 nothing anymore. You cannot, like, I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you like how I look. I don't care. It's the absolute bonus of being a perimenopausal woman or a menopausal woman. I read this whole thing a few days ago, and I want to make a video about this too, because there are only a very few species that keep the female of the species far longer than the male. So in humans, in elephants, in whales, the female of the species outlives the male by decades often. And if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, you might be curious, because you might say, well, why, like, the females aren't fertile anymore? Like, males remain in their fertility a lot longer. So obviously staying in fertility would be useful to the species. So why are the female of these particular kinds of mammals outliving the males by decades? Like, what kind of sense does that make? Well, these are specific mammalian species, and I think it's gorillas too. I forget. There's like 4 or 5 of these mammalian species where this happens. Um, but it is species where information is integral, and where the elder of the female, the matriarchal female, carries just a massive value for the culture. And I do think there is this culture of, this plastic surgery, youth culture, objectification culture, which has unfortunately devalued the older woman to the detriment of our literal entire species, because the wisdom that the woman has who no longer cares about being fertile. Like, there is this, and I remember older women telling me about it, that there's just like this massive fuck you that comes, where you just like do not give any more fucks about, any of this. And I feel like, I think I've arrived. I imagine I will just arrive into this even more. But it feels like a cold plunge, I guess I would say, where you like, I've just like, like that feeling you have after a cold plunge, where you're like, wow, that was shocking and cold, but like, so like, I suddenly feel just like completely liberated and free. I just feel so, yeah, absolutely. Like, I just would, like, this morning when I saw all these comments that I got from this video I did yesterday, on they were mainly on my Facebook, these and on my Instagram. I just was laughing. I just was laughing. I was just like, you like 20 somethings are still so concerned. You're so concerned that, like, you think, that people think you're pretty or nice or whatever. And, I'm just like, it's like just such an empowering feeling. Like, I am so far beyond that now. Like, your little hilarious insults, just like, they're like little flies that I can flick away with my finger. Like, you can't touch me with that nonsense.
And do you think that that is a consequence of having survived cancer? How do you feel like it's changed you in your life?
Yeah, I do. I do feel like it's changed me, because it was, I yeah, I think I do think it's partially the age. I do think it's partially just being, in this, perimenopausal age, but I do think it's the cancer as well, in that, I thought that dying was a possibility. I did not know. I mean, the doctors, it's like, I don't really know. I don't know for 100% sure, but when the doctors themselves seemed scared, like I was scared when the doctors were so concerned, and they were like, you shouldn't have waited this long. You left it too long before you came in, and that, like, and it was in my lymph, and there's all this, like, I actually cleared all of the cancer from my lymph with the diet. That was another great thing. But anyway, but when they were so concerned, I was concerned. And I don't know how much they were like, they try to like put the fear of God in you so that you do all the protocols, but I feel like I did have that fear in me, and I was afraid. And also, I thought about, frankly, I thought a lot about Magdalene. I thought a lot about Magdalene Burns and her brain tumor and her cancer, and and like I'm so glad we had her for when we did. But like, I just also, like, I was like, I don't want to be a martyr. Like, I don't want to die from this. I want to come back. And I also think, just like, yeah, it just makes you think, like, also, I just like laying in bed for 2 years practically. I mean, I was online a little bit, but mostly I was just like laying in bed. Like, walking was exhausting. I would go on walks, but like, everything was exhausting. Everything cost me a ton of energy. um I just did not feel good. You just, when you're in chemo, you just, like, you feel poisoned. You just feel poisoned all the time. Like, you just, I don't know. There's no better way to describe it. It's not just like nausea. It's like you feel that poison in all your cells. It's just a really gross feeling. And I felt like, it gave me a lot of time to be like, what am I doing? What do I want to do? What am I doing? And I don't think I wouldn't say I was like half-assing it before. I mean, I feel like I was dedicated to this cause before, but yeah, cancer just really reinvigorated me for this fight, and it just made me feel like life is friggin' short. What am I doing with it? And I'm, I have renewed discipline and drive, because what am I here for? What do I want my impact to be? Who am I here for? I am here for me, and my family and my loves, but I am here for women and girls. And we all have gifts to share. I do think it takes all of us. We all have amazing gifts to share. And I just had this amazing conversation with Kara Danske. I see her in the space. We had this amazing conversation yesterday, and I think, we all bring really unique things into this fight. And I think that that's another thing about this, matrilineal communities. Like elephants have a matrilineal community. Having what would have been the crones and the elder women of the community, this kind of community is very important. And we are living through, like, talking about, going back to the earlier conversation, we are in an archetype of competition. And consumer capitalism really fosters this notion of competition, but really, we are a herd species. We are a social species, and we are only really going to thrive with cooperation. And there's, it's, we have the myth of competition, but it's like being in competition with yourself. It's like saying, well, my hand is better than my knees. Like, well, like, hands and knees are very different, and they're like really both functionally super necessary and important. We are all important. And I just see that more and more. And it really helps me value everyone else. Like, it helps me really value other women, but it also just helps me value myself. Like, it's not about it's not about competing, but it is about sharing my gifts. And like, there is a short amount of time that I'm going to be here to share these gifts. I mean, I hope it's longer than I thought for a minute, but ultimately life is short, and this is the only time I have to share these gifts. So I'm just like, yeah, driven right now.
Well, before we get to our last question, I have one that I like to throw out there to women just because it's always interesting to me. What is one thing that you wanted to be when you were little that you wish you had done?
Um, gosh. Uh, I one thing that I wish that I did is I mean, I don't know. I've done a lot of what I wanted to do. It's a really hard one, but I don't know. Maybe I would say I used to. This is maybe from my teen and 20s, but I used to write a ton of poetry, and I do think my poetry is very beautiful, and it's actually nothing that I ever tried to put in front of the world. I have a lot of gifts that I have put in front of the world, with theater and acting and writing and directing and writing essays in terms of this ideology and my grad school and writing. I've written some short stories and plays that I put forward, but I think I never poetry is so intimate and it's so personal, and yeah, I think that maybe is something, yeah, that I wish not, maybe not, I don't know. And I think everything happens the way that it should, and well, it just happens the way it does happen. So I don't know, shoulda, woulda, coulda, I don't know, but yeah, I think that's something that I would, my young self would have loved to have happen.
Thanks. I know that's always one. It's like, why is she asking me that? Because that's how I roll. So what are you working on now? What's on the horizon for you?
I am just wrapping up my first iteration of my boundary course, which I have had. I had 17 women participate. It has been really amazing, and I've just been really thrilled to be able to share a lot of the knowledge, like the actual knowledge and research that I have. But two, just I have a lot of activities. So the whole course has been a lot of me sharing this actual just like research, but also doing these activities with women, and watching them learn more about self-trust and learn more about how to trust their intuition, because I called it the boundary reset, but boundaries are mostly about self-trust. They are mostly about being able to listen to your intuition. So that has been really amazing to be a part of, and I'm just so grateful to all the women who participated, because their willingness to be vulnerable and willingness to fully commit to all of the different games and activities I've thrown at them has been just really beautiful. And I'm really excited to ultimately, I'm gonna record it and have it available for download. I'm obviously, I have to just record it without them, because there's so many personal stories in the group. But and then so that I'm going to offer that again, and I think I'm going to offer a round two, because these women are just like wanting to take it further. So I'm excited for that. And I also am working on in June, I'm going to do a webinar for parents. So there's a lot that I talk about in terms of child development, in terms of kids being able to trust their instincts, in terms of, yeah, these fairy tales and stories that I talk about that give some primal safeguarding lessons. I am putting together, yeah, just a intensive 3-hour webinar that will be geared towards parents. Of course, it is, it's worthy of it's worthy of anyone who wants to come. It's worthy of, women who are in this fight, but it's going to specifically, be geared towards giving parents some more ideas and tools and tips and ways of observing this and ways of approaching it. And of course, I will be coming from the position of having a massive critique of gender dysphoria, because I really worry that that is where some parents and even some women are still entrenched, because they are hooked, that empathy trap of the ROGD child. If you really believe children get gender dysphoria, it gives you a lot of belief in this quote unquote trans child. So I will be really trying to take down that notion while also giving a lot of support tools.
Well, that is amazing. And once again, I just want to, I'm going to give you one more question. If you could give advice to any woman who, or man who's maybe listening, who's new to, and it's sometimes it's hard for us to imagine that there's people who don't know what's going on out there, but there are, and we're seeing more and more of them speak up. What would be the one piece of advice that you would want to give to someone that's newly peaked? Because it's not, it's a harsh world being peaked.
Um, I would say that living in freedom actually feels a lot better than playing it safe. I think that a lot of reason why people don't speak out is because they're playing it safe in terms of, knowing that they're going to lose friends. I mean, we all of us who have lost friends, when we went super public, knew it. We knew. I knew. I definitely knew that I was 100% going to lose friends, and that kept me from speaking publicly for a couple of years. I'm sad to say, even with my 10 years of being in it. But I would say the freedom that I have felt after speaking out, now the friends that I have, I know that they are my friends through thick and thin. So the sense of freedom I have to be able to be myself is massively, just free, literally freeing and empowering. So I would encourage that. And then I think the other thing that I would encourage and just kind of push people on, I have met some of these young women who are speaking out. And I recently met Frances Stout. She faced this first when she was 14 years old. She was playing volleyball, and this is in Tumwater, Washington, and had a boy on her team, and she refused to play with him, and she refused to go in the locker room with him. And she has faced massive backlash, from students and from adults from her whole school. She's talked about like being spit on at school, being called names, getting death threats, and she's only 16 now, but she's been living this at school since she was 14. And I just am super impressed with her poise and her fight. But these girls like her, they just absolutely break my heart, because why is she taking the hits? Why does she should just be focusing on playing volleyball? She should literally be as shallow as these like other girls who are yelling at me. She should be thinking about her hair. She should be thinking about volleyball. She should be thinking about the school dance. She should be thinking about where she wants to go to college. She should be thinking about her homework. She should not be facing death threats from stupid trans rights activists. So I just encourage every adult, like, why are we letting kids take these hits? I'm an adult woman. I can take the hits, and it just absolutely breaks my heart to know that there are, girls who are speaking in front of their school boards because, there are no adults speaking for them. So, any adult who feels a little bit afraid, I would give you a little nudge and say, do it, because you are an adult, and don't let the kids take the hits for you.
That was something that Coach Blade was saying last time, that when you're an athlete, you need to focus on being an athlete. And you don't need to be expanding all your energy on fighting this war. The rest of us need to be fighting this war. And that's what you're saying too.
Yeah.
If there's anybody that has a question for Amy, do put it in the comments and we can put it to her. So you seem to be in a really good space now. Is that true?
Yeah, I very much am. I have or I'm sort of in the process. I still have like one little foot in Port Townsend, but I've left Port Townsend, and I'm living elsewhere. It feels frankly great to be out of that town where I'm kind of a a known pariah in my town. So it feels much nicer to be out of there. And yeah, I have a lot of I'm really proud of the work that I've been doing, and I have I'm basically just I'm doing a thing where I've been, like juggling 3 balls, then I'm juggling 4, now 5, now 6, and I have a few more big projects that I really want to take on. Um I have a book that I'm working on that, has all of the stuff that I talk about from the perspective of embodiment and instincts and intuition. And that's happening right now, but that's kind of will be my main 2027 project. So I have goals for myself and things that I want to be able to share and add to this conversation in an even deeper way, because I feel like, I've made a lot of these short videos where I talk about these things a lot, but ultimately, there's a lot of depth that I would like to be able to unpack in a much more in a much deeper and more comprehensive way.
I also want to say, if you're in the space and you haven't seen Amy's wonderful photographs that are in the comments, do go down and have a look and check out the links that we've got down there. I haven't seen any questions. Can you see any questions, Peach?
I am double checking. Looks like we just have nothing but support for you, Amy. So there you go.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you too, and the work that you're doing with this space. And I love all the spaces that have been popping up. I know you're also involved in Turf Radio News, and I know Maureen is involved with Casbah, and I know, like, we have so many amazing women who are fighting this. And X, even though I have taken to TikTok to talk to these youngsters, X remains, the app that I feel like is just filled with absolute amazing warriors and allies in this fight. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Make sure you go check out Amy's YouTube channel, subscribe, support her, and make sure that you're going to check out the Red Tent on YouTube. All of these great storyteller spaces are up there. We've talked to some amazing women. Amy's space will be going up there next week as well, across all the audio platforms. We've interviewed Vaishnavi Sundar. We've interviewed. No, that's not true. We don't do interviews around these parts. We're just having conversations. We've had a great conversation with Kara Dansky, Linda Blade, Skylar Gwynn, Cynthia Breheny, you name it, and we are talking to women. And because that's what's important, is there's more to us than just a post, right? There's so many layers to each one of us, and the more we can see each other as women walking our own paths, the stronger that we're going to be. I'm going to turn it, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Hazel Moon to talk about what we have coming up. And what an amazing conversation with you today, Amy. And I feel like I really feel like I got to know you even more.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, if anyone wants to be in the loop about the sort of more courses and events I'm putting on, go to my website, which is knownheretic.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Amy. It's been a really brilliant conversation. Next time on Storytellers in 2 weeks, we have Fiona McAnena coming on. She is the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, and she wrote the amazing Turf Island, How the UK Resisted Trans Ideology, which came out last year. And it also is out an audiobook narrated by yours truly, and we will be giving away some copies of the audiobook. So do come to the space. Also in June, we have Vera of Jill Magazine from Canada, who's going to be coming in to talk to us. So I hope you'll all come back then. And remember that we all have a story. If you want to come and tell yours, get in contact with the Red Tent. Thank you, everybody.